So hello guys and welcome back to the channel. Now I think this is a video that some of you guys have been looking forward to, and that is the Forgotten Ponds carp campaign. If you guys follow me on social media, I did mention on there, give a little sneak peek as to the fact that I have been out on these ponds and I've been doing a bit of carp fishing. Now this is over 3 sessions, and we'll talk through them right now and we'll go through the footage as well. I didn't do too much talking while I was filming these videos because I didn't want to spook the fish. Obviously, wild ponds, I didn't want to have too much of my foghorn voice scaring these fish off. So the first of these 3 sessions, I didn't know how to go about fishing these ponds. Wasn't really sure on what the weed was like, and really where the fish hung out. All I knew is when I was out pike fishing, I saw a couple. So this session, I brought 2 rods, which are the setups that I brought every single time I've been out, which is the Carp Spirit Blacks 3-pound test 10-foot carp rods, both with Akuma Samar bait feeder reels loaded with 12-pound mono. But the first session I went out there was essentially, this fish jumping behind me, was essentially just a recce, just to find out what was going on. I had just planned to stalk the fish, maybe fish some floating baits because it was still quite sunny. This is sort of mid-October, maybe the beginning of October. And yeah, I'd like to say it was a bust, but it wasn't, because it meant I learnt some more about the water. So I didn't catch anything, but I did have a couple close calls with some fish on the surface. I was fishing some floating baits, which we'll take a look at in session 2. And I also noticed that the pond was 90% weed. Literally the whole thing blanket weed. I'm not talking about bits and bobs, solid. I'm talking probably like 4 or 5 foot thick blanket weed, and it covered the entire pond apart from a little strip round here, which is where I've been fishing this entire time, which is maybe about half a canal width, and it's about 4 foot deep. There's no weed there. Then it hits a solid wall of weed, and I did notice the fish were actually feeding on top of the weed. There was no fish in the areas where there weren't any weed, so that got me thinking about how I was going to plan the next session. I decided if I'm going to draw them fish out of the weed, I'm going to need to pre-bait. So at the end of that session, at the end of my first session, I put in loads of pre-bait. I put in all the sweet corn I had left with me. I put in all the pellets that I had, which was some Big Fish River Range pellets. So I just launched them in all around the margins, in the area where there wasn't any weed. And I decided at the crack of dawn the next day, I was going to go out and do session 2, first light, and get those rods in the margin where there's no weed, both on bottom baits. So I come out onto the bank. It was a chilly autumn morning, and straight away, as soon as I got to the swim, after beating through the bushes like I have to do every time to get down to this peg, is I did notice the water was very coloured in the swim where I'd been pre-baiting. Instead of it being gin clear that it had been the day before, it was like a grey mucky colour. All the silt had been churned up, and it weren't long before I noticed some tails in the margin, and I noticed some bubbles fizzing up, and I knew that I'd obviously pre-baiting had worked. So I decided to get both my rods out. They're both bottom baits. One of them was an inline lead that I cast out to the weed in front of me, the wall of weed where the fish seem to like to feed in, and then the other rod I put right down, just tucked into the margin where I'd seen a couple of tails coming up, and that was just on like an 1.5 ounce lead and a lead clip. It was only a light lead because I was fishing literally 2 foot from the bank. And well, mistakes were made immediately, and I'll show you that right now. Got one already. We got one. Oh, come off. Fuck. Didn't have my drag set today. I tightened it up to max. I didn't think I was going to get one that quick, and it broke me. At least the lead came free as well. I had obviously a quick release lead on. I didn't even have time to put my rod down. So what had happened was I'd got my drag set fairly tight on both rods from the session before. I was fishing in the weed, and obviously I needed all that backbone to be able to pull those fish out of the weed if I hooked one. While this session I forgot to change my drag. So when I positioned my rig down in the margin, before I even had a chance to put the bait runner on, a carp picked it up and ran instantly and snapped through the 12-pound mono. Obviously it was on a lead clip, which means the fish would have dropped the lead, but I was really unhappy because obviously I'd pre-baited the swim. I didn't even know what the stocking was like in this pond, and I just wanted to get the first fish on the bank, and I lost it. And it must have been a half decent one to break through that line, but never mind. Straight after that we had another bit of action. I put that rig straight down into the margin again. This time I believe it was on a 3 running rig, and yeah, you'll see.
loosen the drag off so I don't have the same thing happen that I did last time. I think there's still carp feeding down there. I think. There we go, we got one, we got one. Oh, it's tiny. I didn't realise I fished that small in here. Oh, it's tangled up in the other line as well.
So unfortunately it wasn't a carp as big as the one that broke me off at the beginning. It was a tiny little pasty, but it did show me that there isn't just big carp in here. There's also small ones as well, which also means there's probably some in the middle as well. So there's probably a decent stock, or at least a half decent stock of different sizes and ranges of fish in this pond. That carp was probably only a year old, because carp do grow quite quick, and the shape of it was awesome, almost spherical, which is a wicked shape for the carp, which got me excited for what was to come. Now, a good thing about that carp was, it actually gone through my second line, even though it was only a small pasty. He ran straight underneath my other line and I had to recast. And on these rigs I'd had double corn up to this time, because that's what I'd been pre-baiting the night before. And in my bag I've got some wowsers, which are like almost like a bright yellowy, almost fluorescent colour. So it looks similar to corn, but they were like a balanced bait. So I decided to change the bait on that rod to a wowser, which is a wafting style bait, with a piece of sweet corn to make it a lighter bait, so it's a lot easier for the carp to suck up. And I positioned it in exactly the same place I had done before, and it took no longer than probably 10 minutes before this happened.
Get some bait around it. There we go, fish on, fish on, fish on. That's a better fish. Better fish than that last little one I caught, but it's still not massive. Oh, we got a fish on. It's definitely bigger than that tiny pasty I caught, but it's still not a monster. It's not as big as some of the fish I saw yesterday when I came down. It's definitely bigger than the little pasty I caught. Yes, I had a bleep on that rod, so I knew something was happening. Yep, still not a monster, but a better one. It's difficult landing him underneath all these branches. Oh, now he's wrapped himself up. Yes, he's in the net, he's in the net, he's in the net. Whew, yes. Yeah, definitely not as big as some of the monsters I saw yesterday, but he's a beautiful fish. Real nice hook hole, exactly where we want it. I've caught this beautiful fish. Beautiful common carp, proper wild fish. They're never super fat, these wild fish. Just lean, mean fighting machines. Just digging around in the silt, proper silt munchers, eating all the little invertebrates. Finally I gave him a decent meal, you know, sweet corn, some mix of pellets, and this one nailed the bait after changing over actually to a wafter bait.
So that carp was a lovely fish, not quite the same shape as that little one that I caught, but it was probably a fish of, it was an upper single, maybe an 8-pound, 9-pound fish, something like that. I didn't weigh it obviously, but it was a lovely fish and it got me off the mark. A really nice dark common carp, and it was as soon as I changed the bait, I just put on a wowser and a piece of sweet corn, and that was it. But the problem was after then, the light level started to increase and the fish showing in the margin disappeared. Obviously I'd caught a couple of fish, I had a bit of action, and all I noticed then was that the fish were rising in the weed, and that was when I knew immediately I'm going to have to get some surface baits out there. So I've got some surface baits, I had probably about half a bag because I'd been hammering it out the day before, and I knew that the carp were rising for floating baits. And that was it then. It was just a waiting game, flicking out 3 or 4 pellets every now and again onto the surface, watching these carp come up every now and again. They probably only came up every 20 minutes. They would come up, take a couple of baits and vanish. So what I eventually had to do is, I brought chest waders with me for once in my life, coming out to the Forgotten Ponds. So I waded out probably until it was about waist deep, just enough to get past the tree line so I could make a cast out of one of the durable hookers. And what I did was pelted it right into the weed, which is where these fish were most confident and where I saw them rising on the surface. And I had a gut feeling that something was going to happen. So I turned my GoPro on, and hey presto, it did. We got one, we got one, we got one, right in the reeds. Yep, God, I just turned the GoPro on. Just turned the GoPro on. I think this might be a better fish. I'm gonna have to walk this way to get him out from the reeds. Oh, come on. Let's not lose this fish. That's definitely a bigger one, I think. Unless it's just because it's in so much weed. It is in so much weed. Don't even know if it's still on. Damn it, I knew it'd be a tricky one. Cast into that area because it is. It was right on the edge of the reed line. Yeah, it's still on, it's still on. And I think this must be a bigger fish. Unless it's just a really hard fighting one. There we go, got it out from the reeds. There's a lot of weed out there though. I can feel it grating on all the weed. Oh yes. My big camera ran out of memory, so I'm gonna have to delete some footage to be able to show you this fish. It's a shame because I was recording myself the entire time while I was floater fishing, and it was right when, just before this fish took it, that it ran out of memory. Lots of blanket weed. We got it out, we got it free. We got it free. I don't know if it's as big as that other one I caught. I think it might have just been because it was in so much weed. It just felt a lot bigger. Yeah, oh, it's not very big. Thought it was going to be a really nice one, but still, it's another Forgotten Pond carp. Maybe a similar size to the other one I caught. Probably a good job I didn't get a real big one in that spot, because that would have been impossible to land. Just caught on a floater. Oh, we landed him. He's a real nice looking one though. Oh my god, he's a football. No wonder he was so hard to fight. God, he's a weird shape. And he is a bit bigger than I thought he was. Got that weed on it. Yeah, it's not a bad one actually. This is a real beautiful fish. Unfortunately, the big cameras ran out, which means I can't take any pictures of it. It's a really, really nice, clean, healthy, fat carp from a Forgotten Pond. Look at that fish. Absolutely beautiful. Real fat belly on it. Beautiful condition. Common carp. That is so cool. Definitely bigger than I thought he was. Obviously he looks really, really short, but I didn't realise how fat he was until I got him in the net. He is a chunk. Definitely not one of the big ones out there, but it's starting to make me question whether there's a real monster out there, because I've seen some really long fish and really fat fish that could be easily well over 20 pounds. So let's get this one back. What a beauty. So we'll pack up soon. But would you believe it, this fish is just into double figures. Short one, but real good in size. A future big fish. There are some big fish in here. So that was an absolutely beautiful carp and a wicked shape. It was the exact same shape as that little tiny pasty that I'd caught. It was almost a complete spitting image of it, but just like 10 times the size, if not bigger. Beautiful fish. Once again, didn't weigh. It was probably a low double figure fish. But unfortunately, that meant the end of my session, because big camera that you're watching me on right now ran out of power and I hadn't brought a spare battery. So I decided I'd caught that wicked fish, showed it to the GoPro, released it, and I'd really enjoyed myself, and I was going to end it there. That was going to be the end of the campaign, because the weather and the temperature was going to be dropping. But it was playing on my mind that I didn't manage to get that last fish on the main camera, and I really wanted some nice pictures of it. One of the first fish that I've caught from this forgotten pond. Nice to document it. So I decided it was worth another session, and that's the one that you're watching me on today. And if you're watching it and there's still some time after the video, it means that something's happened. Now, this session, I decided it had to be a similar tactic to the last time. I had to pre-bait the night before, fish some static leads, and then maybe go on to surface baits later on, although the weather is a lot colder today. A lot of the leaves are falling off the trees now, and it's getting down pretty cold at night. So I came out again and pre-baited with sweet corn. Now, sweet corn is a great pre-bait because it doesn't particularly fill the fish up. It's not really full of much good stuff. It's not really full of proteins like pellets and boilers are. It's pretty much just empty, so they can eat as much as you want and they don't really get full. So I put loads of corn in there, almost a full freezer bag of corn, and then I also threw in a few boilers and a few big fish river range pellets like I had done before, and some ground bait, just smelly stuff that was just going to attract the fish, hopefully from the weed and the other areas of the lake to this spot. So I got here this morning, crack of dawn, well, about half an hour after light, beautiful conditions, loads of rain, overcast but yet mild, perfect fishing conditions. I put both rigs out in front of me and there wasn't much showing. I was surprised. The water was coloured like it was that previous session when I pre-baited, but I got the feeling that maybe the fish had eaten all the food and moved off because I put my rigs out, there was nothing showing in the margin, there were no swirling, there was not many bubbles coming up. But what I did notice was, out in the weed, in the remaining weed that's left, because it's been dying off, there was lots of bubbles and massive patches of bubbles. They must have been good sized fish. Some of the fish I've seen cruising in here are really nice fish. And there was about 4 or 5 patches, and I had a bit of an idea. I thought, maybe if I leave a trail of breadcrumbs in the form of sweet corn over from where the fish are feeding in the weed all the way through the weed and out to where I put my rigs, maybe I can get a carp to follow that trail of sweet corn all the way over to my bait. So I cut the pouch, fired over a catapult of sweet corn a couple of metres away from the fish, then a couple of metres before that and a couple of metres before that. So there's probably 50 or 60 grains of sweet corn leading from the patches of bubbles, probably about 30 yards out, all the way to the margin where my rods were. And gradually it worked. I watched these patches of bubbles get closer and closer, and some of them stuck to the weed, they wouldn't move, and eventually one of them ventured out of the weed right in front of me. And well, the rest is history. Bubbles fizzing up really close to my right hand rod. Oh, there's a massive patch of bubbles. 100% that's a carp anyway. That is really close to where I baited my swim. That's probably about half a metre to the left, and it's moving right over the top of it. Whoa, Jesus Christ. That tore off. I just realised I didn't have my alarm set properly. It did not make a noise. Oh crap. It's going underneath all the weed. This is a good fish. Why did I not have my alarm? Oh, I've got it muted. I've got my alarm muted. I don't know if it's a huge fish. Why did I have my alarm muted? When I first turned it on, it was really loud, so I turned it down. I didn't realise I'd turned it down to mute it. Jesus. Good you had both cameras recording though. Oh, it's not a monster, but it's a nice fish. In the net. Look at that. Another pristine common carp. They're all a really interesting shape in these ponds. There we have it. If all the carp in this forgotten pond are a similar shape to this, there could be
some real monsters in here. Saw a small patch of bubbles fizzing up down the margin, right over where I put my bait at the beginning of this session. Took my eye off the ball, didn't realise I'd turned the volume off on my bite alarm and it ripped off. It was beautiful. Forgotten Ponds tank. Not even one of the big ones. That is awesome. Let's get him back. During the fight I did notice he's knocked off a couple of scales. So I've got some carp first aid spray. Just to spray on those wounds. That isn't actually a lost scale, it's just a bit of a graze. There we go. Now he's ready to rest and release.
So that was awesome. We had that fish probably about an hour ago now, and about 5 minutes after I caught the fish, that was when the clouds went and the sun broke through, and almost immediately all the bubbles stopped. There was no more fish feeding. I had a couple of fish top on the far side, it jumped out in the opposite reeds, but there's no fish feeding whatsoever. And for the past hour, I haven't seen one fish even show signs of feeding in the swim. So that concludes our trilogy of sessions at the Forgotten Ponds for the carp. I don't know whether I'm going to find any more time to do it again before the weather gets too cold. I've got loads of sessions planned, predator fishing wise, perch, pike, underwater filming, that I don't know whether I'm going to find time. If we keep on with this mild weather, let me know guys if you want me to come back out here again and try for one of the real big ones, because these fish are wicked shapes. The three of the carp that I've caught 4 altogether, I'm counting the little one, but 3 of them were just round, big fat fish, but so short. And the fish that I've seen out in the open are big fish. So if they're as deep as the ones that I've been catching, they could be some real monsters. Obviously it's a waterway, it isn't really pressured at all, and there's no access to it, so the fish stocks are completely unknown. So I'm really looking forward to getting back out here again, maybe, even if it is next year in the springtime. But I've really enjoyed myself, and I've caught some fantastic looking carp, absolutely beautiful looking fish. And thank you guys for watching. If you've liked the format of this video, let me know. If you've enjoyed it, please don't forget to like it and maybe think about subscribing. Check out my Instagram down below, where I give updates to up and coming videos, as well as asking you guys questions on what you want me to do next. And I'll catch you guys later.